Light Pollution News, July 2026. I Miss My Landline is another episode of Light Pollution News, and you won't want to miss this lineup today. From the forest of Oregon, I welcome back Mr. Michael Calhoun to the show. And with us today, we have two people who are heavily involved in outreach, the Dark Sky Discovery Center's Mr. Ted Blank and astronomer Amy Oliver. This episode, we talk about community relations, specifically in regards to the Powell Observatory in Kansas City. And did you know that there's a satellite out there that will allow you to spell out your name? Oh, and how would you feel about renting an Airbnb with its own observatory? All this and much more coming up next on today's episode of Light Pollution News. Welcome to Light Pollution News. I'm your host, Bill McGeaney. Each month I go out and fetch all of the news around this encompassing big topic of light pollution. Then I bring on three of my favorite people to chat about it, and we have hopefully some pretty good discussion. I'll leave that to you, the listener, to decide if it's any good or not. Light Pollution News is a listener-supported show, and your support helps us do literally everything on the show. So one of the things I'm looking to do in 2026 is offload some of my responsibilities to really be able to continue to focus on the key parts of the core elements of the show. Those admin responsibilities include guest scheduling and maybe an additional social media hand. I think we're getting to the point where we need a little more expansive social media. So those are some of our constraints, and you, the supporter, helps us actually cover those expenses. So if you like what we're doing, you'd like to see the show expand its reach, continue to grow, why not consider being a supporter? You can learn more by simply clicking the support the show link on today's show notes, or by heading over to lightpollutionnews.com, support the show. As a reminder, over on our website, lightpollutionnews.com, you can find all the different things we talked about today. A nice little summary of the articles and papers from today's show. We have ecology tab that lists literally all the ecology articles that we come across in this show. Very helpful. You can throw that in AI and it can give you a good breakdown on everything in there. One of the reasons that I created was so it could be a resource for anyone listening. It's all there. And you supporters are the ones who make this happen. Thank you already if you're a supporter. If you're on the fence and considering supporting Light Pollution News, thank you for your consideration. I really appreciate it. Well, this month I'm really excited. I have a great slate of guests. You guys, one individual who I've had back on the show now. This is your third time, I believe, Mike. And then I have two people who've never been here before. It's always fun to have new people. You get to see how they're going to react. And you guys, new people are usually a little more nervous and a little uptight, I find. But you guys seem really relaxed, and I'm excited about that. So there's nothing to worry about here. We're all friends. First up, I want to introduce Mr. Michael Calhoun. Michael is an environmental activist from the stunning Pacific Northwest, all the way up in Vernonia, Oregon. Mike, last I heard from you, you're board chair of the Columbia Soil and Water Conservation District, and you're a past recipient of Oregon Urban and Community Forestry Award from the Oregon Department of Forestry. Has anything been updated? Anything changed? How's life going, man?
It's going good. I've always got different little projects that I'm working on, and then the hurdles always come. So I'm always jumping them. But yeah, no, I'm keeping busy, and I have a few little updates a little later in the show. I can bring those up.
I'm excited to hear. Great stuff. You guys in the sunny season right now?
Yeah. And we're enjoying every minute because we only got 3 months of it. So
I heard out there, you guys always tell everyone it rains all the time because you don't want people coming out in the summertime.
we used to have a governor who had a sign that said, "Welcome to Oregon, but please don't stay." That sign's not there anymore, though.
Mm-hmm. I wonder what party that was. Anyway, moving on. Next up, I couldn't be more thrilled with these upcoming guests. We have first Amy Oliver with us. And Amy, do you want to take the lead here? I don't want to conflate or confuse anyone with anything I may missay.
Sorry, I am a lot of things. So primarily, I'm the public affairs officer, head of education and public outreach in the Science Center, and a light pollution scientist for the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory's Fred Lawrence Whipple Observatory, which is a part of the Center for Astrophysics, Harvard and Smithsonian. Say that 10 times fast and I will give you a prize.
That is a very long sentence. When I read that, I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to keep the listener on this one.
I know, right? There's a few other people who that gets a little bit longer. And imagine them introducing themselves. And then on top of that, so I'm also the principal investigator for a couple of really interesting light pollution science projects, which are Dark Sky Net, which is a light pollution monitoring network that is multinational and ever growing right now. And also Project Glowworm, which is about unexpected bioluminescence at elevations above 8,000 feet. And that's really interesting for anybody interested in light pollution because bioluminescence requires darkness to exist and to thrive. And I'm also a Sky Nights presenter for the University of Arizona's Mount Lemmon Sky Center. I'm the chair of the very internationally watched Tucson and Pima County Outdoor Lighting Code Committee. We're in the middle of rewriting our code right now, so that's a really big deal for us. And I'm a fellow of the Royal Astronomical Society for all the things I said already, and I was recently named as one of the 25 most influential people in the lighting industry. So that's a lot going on in my life.
That is a lot. Do you sleep?
No. This picture behind me is evidence of I don't sleep.
So you at home, the picture behind, you want to describe the scene a little bit? This is all taken from an iPhone 17. It's incredible. It's a great shot.
I see iPhone 17 Pro Max. And
okay, Pro Max.
So what your listeners can't see right now is that I was standing on the top level balcony of the Bull Dormitory at about 7,800 feet in elevation on Mount Hopkins. And I pointed my cell phone on a tripod at the MMT, which is the 14th largest optical telescope in the world, let it take a 30-second exposure, and the Milky Way looks like it is pouring onto the MMT. And I have not edited the image. So it's what you guys are seeing in this room right now is pretty spectacular.
And it's one of those images where the composition is perfect because the Milky Way is gigantic compared to the MMT.
It is, and it's a pretty big telescope. That's a 5-story high, 5-story wide, 5-story deep building. And the Milky Way is just dwarfing it. And it's just one little part. I can't take credit for the composition, by the way, because to my left was this big post that holds up the building. And to the right was like a 100-foot tall pine tree. So this was what I had to work with, was this very tiny space. And it just turned out perfect.
Turned out great. That's an amazing shot. And before we recorded today, you were talking about how you're a connoisseur of phone photography, mainly because you do a lot of outreach and you have to deal with this stuff. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what's a good secret for a listener at home if they're doing any kind of phone astrophotography?
Tripod. That's the most important thing you can do, because most cell phones, minus like the Google Pixel, can't get above 10 seconds without a tripod. And then you're going to be shaking. No one is steady enough to really hold a phone perfectly still for a very long period of time. But that tripod makes all the difference. And most modern cell phones also take into account movement of the stars, and they stabilize that image automatically for you, so you don't have huge issues with the image you're taking. That's true of Samsung. It's true of iPhone. And so there's some pretty spectacular things you can do.
Yeah, it's programmed into that algorithm now. That's pretty neat. That's pretty good. Okay, well, learned so much here. I just got a Canon 6R6 Mark II, and I feel like I'm vastly being outdated in no time. These things.
No, cell phones can't do everything. You still need your DSLR.
Right, you just keep telling me that.
Yeah, they can't pull out all the color. A cell phone really can't do the really spectacular things that a DSLR can do. Plus, they can't get that true wide field of view that you can get. They can't do like a fill flash of objects to darken them up, but then brighten their surrounding area, pull out the night sky. So there's a lot you can't do with a cell phone, at least not yet.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you can validate that for me. I appreciate that. And then last up, I have Mr. Ted Blank. And Ted, I got your name from Vicki Dirksen back when she was on the show from Night Sky Tourist Podcast. And you've been involved in outreach and amateur astronomy for quite a while. And you're telling me before we start this that you got your first telescope in 2007, and then you were doing outreach almost immediately thereafter, a few years after that. And I feel like that mimics a lot of amateur astronomers that I know. When I was president of the Delaware Valley Amateur Astronomers, had some people come on, and one of the first things they did was they would get in some kind of role and they'd start doing outreach, and they'd start, talking to people and start setting up events in different areas. And I guess it's natural, right?
100%. When I first got started, I joined the New Hampshire Astronomy Society when I lived back east. And one of the first things we did was arrange for public outreach on a Saturday night nearest first quarter moon on a sidewalk in downtown Portsmouth, New Hampshire, which is very busy for restaurants and bars and things. It's a great place, lots of walking, lots of brick buildings. That's been going on now for over 20 years, always on the Saturday night closest to first quarter moon. I remember being inspired, of course, by John Dobson, like many of us were, who apocryphally said, when I first looked through a telescope and saw Jupiter and Saturn, the first thing I said was, everybody's got to see this. And he dedicated the rest of his life to that. That's an inspiration. So I do spend a good amount of time out on the sidewalk. I'm Solar System Ambassador, as you mentioned, and that's a cool volunteer job. There are 1,500 of us around the country, and we get briefings from the scientists who operate, things like helicopters and rovers on Mars, who are too busy to give more than about one public talk a year, but we get their presentations, and then we get to spread that news around to the public, whether it's at a community center or sometimes even on a cruise ship. Once in a while, cruise lines will bring an enrichment speaker on board. I've done that a few times to explain to the guests.
Must have been a horrible experience.
It was brutal. It was brutal. All the guests love it, and also do green laser pointer tours on the ship if the captain's willing to turn out some lights and all. And I'm in Fountain Hills, Arizona, near the Phoenix area. We are an international dark sky community. We were the 17th dark sky community, so certified by Dark Sky International. I've been on the committee that got that started back in 2018. And also, as I mentioned, met my wife.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about this. So before the show, if you don't mind, I apologize for cutting you off here, Ted. Before the show, you mentioned something, and I was thinking, and I know this probably did it. I don't know if it took place in Portsmouth. I remember Portsmouth being an old city.
Very much so, yeah.
It's got a lot of character. So, it's got a lot of its personality. You're telling me how you met your wife doing sidewalk astronomy.
That's right. And here in Fountain Hills, I bring my telescope out a couple times a week to the local fountain park where we have what was the tallest fountain in the world. Now I think it's second or third. And Peggy was walking her dog in the park. That's how we met.
It's amazing. That's a story. So if anyone wants to meet their future spouse, you just get a telescope and go out to the sidewalk.
Absolutely. I think I met her dog first. I bent down to pet the dog.
It's usually how the tale goes.
Just the dog was friendly. Then I looked up and said, "Oh, she's cute too." So there we go.
Well, there you go. Well, Ted, thank you for being here. We're going to talk a little more on the big project, the Dark Sky Discovery Center over in Fountain Hills, in the next episode. But for right now, we'll jump into it. But it's interesting because I think everyone here is really oriented on the outreach side. Being involved with the outreach gives you the best perspective of these topics, I think, and we'll get into it. But you don't have that. You're usually dealing with people who are enthused to be around these topics. So, okay, well, let's jump into it. I know we like to talk about satellites because they make everyone's night photos. Maybe not on the iPhone. The iPhone might be able to, or some of these algorithms, are they able to filter them out, Amy?
Not filter. They can't filter them out. However, there is a feature, at least that I am aware of, in iPhone where you can do cleanup and you can just slide your finger across something. That might be a satellite or a person, your foot or your hand or whatever. It'll take it out. It's not perfect though. And so I would say there's a satellite appearing in every third photo I take, at least one. There's been a few pictures I've taken where there's 20 or 30 of them quite visible.
That's always exciting. I was thinking this the other day because what I do for my photos is I painstakingly go through and remove the satellite streaks. I think, I had some past guests on here who would probably think that's insanity, like literally the definition of insanity, but because you're just going through every frame. Like you said, sometimes you have a whole bunch that you're just pulling out. But it seems like something that could be it seems like something you could program, like in AI, some of this new Photoshop AI stuff, I feel like we'll be able to see that because it's a direct line. It's very streaky compared to everything else in there. So if you're listening at home and you want a little vibe project, this would be the one. But we use satellites for a lot these days. And one of them was this one article I saw from NASA saying that you can they have a little fun website out there. It's called Your Name in Landsat, where literally it's Landsat images that spell out your name, and you can go in there and just type it in. And I guess they have some kind of coordination between the letters and the images and whatnot. It's just a fun little thing. Have you guys seen any creative, positive uses outside of, say, weather science projects for satellites?
Well, I'll start first. I'm obsessed with that app. I love it. I use it all the time. I even occasionally print people's names and then I mapped the pictures from it and give it to them in a frame because I think it's really neat, particularly because they're using images from all over the world. Mm-hmm. So they used this incredible, beautiful, sophisticated technology to take images that look like the letters of the alphabet to connect to people and their daily lives. Which I think is really special in a lot of ways. But for me, so prior to working in astronomy, really in any way, I worked at Clark Planetarium, had a gap that's important, and then went to the Smithsonian. And in that gap, I worked for a public relations firm where we worked with satellite communications companies and space-based companies. And things they were doing with that technology were things like tracking wildfires. So you could see them as they were starting and then alert first responders. They were tracking drought. And so that farmers could be alerted ahead of time that their crops were drying out, even before they could be notified on their other technology that they have. So things like that. And now that's grown to being able to track famine before it can spread. We're doing really interesting things like somebody is now tracking civil rights marches. And there's some scientists and law enforcement over in the Middle East tracking looters from pyramids. Wow. So they're using satellite technology and imagery for all sorts of really interesting projects. And so it's not always art or something, I would say warm and fuzzy, but they're doing really remarkable things with satellite data and satellite imagery that I think we never would have thought of 20 or 30 years ago.
Oh, so I was in the conservation world, locally here. It's been when Google Earth first came out, has been transformational because in the state of Oregon, we have urban growth boundary. It was a law that was passed several decades ago where is trying to prevent urban sprawl. So if you travel around here, it very much goes from city, suburban, farm. You can almost see the line physically on the road driving, but on the satellite, it helps us understand where the urban growth maybe has spread a little bit too much, or you see wetlands that have been destroyed that weren't supposed to be. So it's been transformational in that aspect. Personally, I'm a privacy rights advocate, so I have some concerns. It's all how the technology is used and who's using it. So it's always an ongoing conversation for sure. So those my views of everything.
Michael, then, so when you're seeing that sprawl, that urban sprawl into, say, a wetland area or another conserved area, are they then able to your knowledge, use that data to help them restore those areas or kind of take that back and fix the issue?
Yeah, we for river restoration, because it depends how far back the original images go, because you have some like airplane images, and of course the technology was different, but you can still see where a river, the original channel was. And that's what's great with high def, 4K, 8K. We can see where a river was originally pretty much destroyed 100 years ago from the lines that are in the farm fields, and then we use that to be able to recreate the original channel.
Oh, wow.
That's amazing.
That is.
Many years ago, a friend of mine introduced me to a BBC program called Time Team. Time Team was a group of archaeologists who went out every weekend and did a 3-day dig on a spot somewhere in the UK. And many of their sites were chosen because of airplane photographs of parch marks of farm fields, where an ancient Roman villa buried a foot underground caused the plants to be under some stress, and so they would be a different color. And you could actually trace the outlines of the Roman villas buried under the ground from 2,000 years ago in the different colors of the farm plants. So that was exciting. Anyway, you can watch Time Team episodes on YouTube now, but a lady named Sarah Parsak has created a citizen science version of this using satellite data called Global Explorer, without an E in front of the Explorer. And somebody called it Indiana Jones meets Google Earth. They're looking for thousands of people to review satellite images, looking for signs of archaeological sites that should be investigated. And so they have an algorithm where if 80% of the people who look at a particular tile think there's something there, their experts will look at it, and then they'll go out and do some ground truth and try to identify these before they are either destroyed or looted by development or by people who would take away artifacts. So I thought that was pretty cool because it ties right in with Time Team. Time Team did it, with airplane aerial photographs from the 50s and 60s, and now we're doing it with satellites.
These are all great uses. I was just going to say, up here they have Cherry Springs State Park, which the individuals who actually founded that park, they looked on plane maps, right? I believe it was, some geological or military plane maps to see the density of, where people they were all living and everything back in the 80s, I think, maybe the early 90s. And that's how they started going to that park, was simply by paging through maps and looking, and then it said, hey, this is kind of flat. This is a good spot. Local density of, people here is X amount. And this is that's how they found it. So it's interesting how we use the sky for many things. One of the things that we are not apparently using the sky for, that is using it for cell phone service at the moment. And this is per T-Mobile's CEO, Srina Gopalan. They've seen very, very little uptake of an a la carte connectivity because most people have enough good connectivity here, I'm presuming, here in our actual terrestrial system, or the tower systems. But they'll use something, use the Starlink interface that T-Mobile has purchased on their phone at, say, national parks and whatnot. That makes up 0.0002% of their users are actively using the satellite cell service that T-Mobile is providing. Is that the trend, or are we going to, does that have legs, do we think? I mean, unless you're living in rural Alaska, do we think cell service via Starlink is going to be the solution?
Look, I live in super rural America, and I also work in more than rural America. And the thing is, there are times where cell phone service is spotty or we don't have it. Actually, I connect to Mexico a lot more often than the United States on certain days of the week because their signal is stronger from the terrestrial plane. But the really big issue that we're seeing with uptake isn't about just people don't know about it or that it's not trendy enough. It's that there are still questions about speed, reliability, long-term viability, because for every satellite SpaceX puts up for Starlink, they're taking up bandwidth in another industry. So there is a limited amount of radio bandwidth for them to exist in, and then they have to start moving into these other spaces. And that includes radio astronomy, by the way. So you can imagine that radio astronomers across the world are putting a hand up and saying, we need to talk before you do this. And the National Radio Astronomy Observatory started working with SpaceX on Starlink issues like this in 2021 when I was working there to develop ways to steer their beams away and to mitigate these mega impacts. But it's a significant conversation, and there hasn't been a really good solution right now. And so you're going to see that they're not able to grow as exponentially and reach that service impact level or that economies of scale to really get growth. I think people are starting to get technology weary. Even as myself, I rely on it for my job. And when I'm not doing something for work, the last thing I want is for my phone to ring. The most devastating moment I had in the last year, technology-wise, at least, was I went all the way to a place called Melimoyu in Chile. Google it later. You've never heard of it. And my cell phone worked.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought, no. And so for the people who live there, for the very small village, that's crucial for their connection to the outside world. But for someone trying to escape that, where do you go anymore? Penguins seem to have cell phone service. So again, we're getting enough terrestrial uptake that it doesn't seem necessary anymore. This isn't the 2017 total solar eclipse fiasco where people couldn't call first response for help. And it isn't the Chicago Pokemon Go disaster where all of the cell phone towers went down because there were too many people there playing Pokemon Go. We've dealt with those issues.
Yeah, I personally won't use my cell phone in certain scenarios because I kind of want to be in the moment, I guess. Last night went down to a Major League Baseball game. Didn't look at it once. Maybe looked at once to text someone, but that's about it. You know, I didn't care about it. It was just there, enjoying the, being there. And it's something to be said for that, not having that technology with you. Go ahead, Mike.
I miss my landline. I'm old enough to know what that is. And I miss it because, the greatest moments are sometimes my cell phone doesn't work at the MMT. And that's great. That's fantastic.
Amy, you hit the nail on the head there with technology. I know I'm in a rural area also, and I have a landline because and lots of people that I know in this community have landlines because they when the power goes out, we don't have cell service in this area because it's how it's all connected. And also piggybacking on the technology bit, personally, like I've always been an advocate of physical media, and I kind of like, gosh, people just don't understand a VHS and how great that was. But what I'm really glad to see is Gen Z is pivoting back towards physical media because it's this sort of, it's not just Gen Z, it's this universal, it's too much. We're inundated with just having it connected with every aspect of our life. So I am really glad if you go on YouTube, type in local physical media news stories, people are getting records or CDs or tapes or books. And it's just this inundation in our lives now with AI. And that's a whole thing in itself. It's just having breaks. I enjoy the no cell phone areas. Of course, nothing. Or going to a theater, I turn my phone off. It's just having that disconnect.
Yeah, it's like a skill now to be able to put yourself in the situation, in the box, to just be there. And Amy, I felt your pain. I believe, I forget where I was at. I do a lot of outdoor stuff and found that I have full coverage, and I was like, this can't be possible.
It's useful, but that hurt. I wanted it to not work.
Yeah, when I read that about T-Mobile, now your cell phone can talk directly to satellites, at least in an emergency. And it seems to me, though, that if you were trying to use it in a really important place where you needed to be reliable, like if you were crossing the Atlantic in your own sailboat, you would want some technology that was really designed for that, like a sat phone. In my experience, got me out of trouble in Australia. We were down there on an asteroid occultation measurement trip, and I got stuck in the mud an hour south of Darwin. And if the sat phone hadn't worked to be able to call Hertz, I wouldn't be here today. I'd still be sitting in that mud puddle. So I know that my phone supposedly has the ability to talk to satellites, and I haven't tried it yet, but maybe it'll save me someday if I'm out hiking. But I think for the kind of reliability that you would need in a real life-threatening situation, you would want a dedicated hardware rather than using your cell phone. That might be contributing to why there's not as much signing up for that.
Well, I want to shift us away from a little technology talk here. Let's get into actual light pollution here. Main story this episode. I have a piece from Monthly Notices of the Royal Astronomical Society. Found that terrestrial light pollution impacted 52% of observatories, and that any sites that showed a statistically significant impact from light pollution, of that group, 60% of them are experiencing sustained brightening year over year. And researchers used their VIIRS data, measuring 100-kilometer radii around each observatory for 12 years between 2012 to 2024. They then averaged the light levels in that area and ran the data for 15 different regression and machine learning models to confirm up the data and find a more effective model in there. That's a little here nor there, but the main through line here is that the brightening is sustained year over year for that chunk of observatories that are impacted by light pollution. So for the majority of them, 60% that have been impacted by light pollution, it's brightening year over year.
So I'm always the one who jumps in first, since my observatory is listed in this survey, and several others I've worked with or at over time are also listed in this. That number is higher than 52%. And VIIRS data is amazing for a lot of things, but it's only one piece of the picture. And so this story is really incomplete. because the way that VIIRS data looks at the Earth, it's missing things. It's not seeing how we are impacted from Earth looking up into the atmosphere. So it's missing that blue LED streetlight wavelength and how that reflects back. So atmospheric reflectivity. It can't see that because VIIRS satellites are above the atmosphere looking down. It ignores things like local mountain geography. It has this sort of, and I hate to say this because I understand why there was a standardization, but a kind of arbitrary 100-kilometer radius looking around where some of the light pollution impacts are more sustained and significant closer or sometimes further away. And there are certain areas, say Death Valley, that are impacted by light pollution further than 100 kilometers away. And that light dome is rather significant on their horizon line, much further away. And then it also flatlines the dark sky values below 22.0. And so I think we have to really look at it and say, this is one really important piece of data. But in their study, they said Kitt Peak National Observatory is not, and I don't really know how I want to say this, but it almost made it seem like they're saying Kitt Peak is not having impacts from Tucson. And I don't think that Kitt Peak would say that because the light pollution is growing in Tucson and they can see that light dome on the horizon. Is that stopping them from doing observations? Not at this time. But is it having an impact on their ability to observe low on that horizon line to their east? Absolutely. And so that's why somebody like me is out there working to reduce light pollution impacts from Tucson on surrounding observatories. Our outdoor lighting code was created specifically to protect like Mount Lemmon, Kitt Peak, and Whipple Observatory. But that's not a 100-kilometer radius, right? So we're in a much tighter radius, but I think we have to look at this for what it is. It's one piece of a puzzle. And so what I want to pass it to Ted, actually, because I know that they're working on a center you're going to cover in a later episode, but putting a significant amount of effort into protecting dark skies in Fountain Hills and the surrounding area so that they don't have to think about this as much as we do somewhere where we have a metropolis staring our observatories and other dark sky preserves right in the face.
Yes, we are, as I said, an international dark sky community. That doesn't mean we have the darkest skies. We are the one closest to a major metropolitan area. Phoenix has 6 million people, and we are protected by a mountain range, the McDowell Mountains, luckily, that blocks most of the direct light. But as you pointed out, Amy, the satellite data doesn't show the impact of reflected light that comes from somewhere else and is bounced off of either clouds or dust particles in the air. We live in the desert and we have a lot of dust in the air, so our skies are bright even when we have no local light pollution. A lot of that light, it's bounced back down. It does two things. It impacts scientific observations here, and it hides that light from the satellite that doesn't see it because it never makes it to space. I think that's part of the reason that in 2023, science reported that light pollution on Earth was not growing at 2% per year. It was growing at 7 to 8% per year because the satellites were seeing only the light that escaped into space that actually wasn't doing any damage to people on Earth. The rest of it was coming sideways. It was blue light, and it was also being reflected from atmospheric particulates. And none of that light made it to the satellite. So it was underestimating by a factor of about 5 how much damage we were really seeing here on Earth.
Wow. Yeah. And recent studies have showed it's localized even more than what the initial percentages were. There's another observatory that was on that list, Amy. Obviously, there are a bunch, but this is an interesting one because we live in a time when America is a really weird and interesting place at the moment. The Astronomical Society of Kansas City's Powell Observatory was on that list. It's club owned, and they actually constructed and showcase a homemade 30-inch Newtonian scope. Pretty astounding. That's great. Talk about having a fun toy for your club to use. When the observatory was constructed back in the mid-1980s, the town it resided in had a head count of 1,700. Since then, it's more than tripled that. Now, Lewisburg has a population close to 6,000. Additionally, growth in the region, including stadium lighting from, say, athletic facilities, sporting facilities, have put a dent in those once pristine night skies. And I went ahead and plugged that Lewisburg, Kansas location into Barrington Russell's Dark Sky site website, the past guest, That's a really great website. Highly recommend that you guys use it at home. And the area, what his site can do, it can kind of project it over time, the change in light. And the area is now sitting somewhere in Bortle 5 to 6. As that is the case, the Astronomical Society of Kansas City is looking to relocate the observatory. So as you can imagine, for any amateur astronomers listening, Ted, I'm sure you experience this, over, say, really the last 5 to 6 years, it's astoundingly hard to go observing, at least here on the east of the Mississippi. It's very hard to find spots that you can actually, it's kind of demoralizing for visual observers because it's hard to find spots that are actually somewhat dark, not just dark. After years of searching, they found a new spot in Miami County, which is the current county that the Powell Observatory is located in. They went along with their proposal to the county, and then resident Jeff Axman threw up his hand and said, wait, you guys are moving that where? And Axman's property would be adjacent to the new observatory. He rallied his neighbors within 1,000 feet of the proposed pad. Axman's concerns were understandable. I think if you're living there, you know, living in a rural area, you want traffic safety. You don't want urban pressure to come in. You kind of don't want this sprawl to reach your neighborhood. To Axman's credit, the club's plan includes some expanded space for a classroom, outdoor amphitheater. It might be pretty jarring for, you know, any rural neighborhood. I assume that any business or other decide moving that area will face the same type of resistance as the observatory. But here's where it gets interesting. Axman organized a petition, which essentially allowed for changing the voting majority needed for permitting the observatory from 3 to 4 commissioners. This is out of 5 commissioners. The Board of County Commissioners voted down the observatory's permit until 1 week later when Commissioner Paul Scruggs said, and I paraphrase, hey, I made a mistake. I didn't actually look at the details here. Let's reconsider this plan. To which the commission did. And hey, wouldn't you know it, Miami County Commission ruled 4-1 in favor of the Astronomical Society of Kansas City by granting them a permit. This is interesting for a number of things we'll get into in a second. You've been around the block in astronomy. You were up in New Hampshire, which I'm sure the Portsmouth area is not pristine skies. You know, that you have items you're focusing on down here in Arizona. How do you convey that if you're this astronomy club, how do you convey that, hey, we're going to be a good neighbor. We're doing this because we have to, you know, like, I don't know, like, how do you work with the community in this?
I thought it was fascinating that the community felt that the observatory was going to impact them when we all know that it's always the other way around. I listened to the recording of the meeting at which it was discussed, and a member of the club said it very well. He said, we did look at lots of options, but importantly, we can't move the observatory 150 miles away from the place where people live and expect them to come out and observe with us and then drive 150 miles home. By the same token, we can't put it in the center of the city where you can't see anything at all. So we compromised. We looked around and found a place that was rural enough, but close enough to the area in Kansas City where most of our people come from. And if I was in a rural environment and something was going to move into my neighborhood, an observatory would be the first thing I would want because it's dark, it's quiet, they don't want any lights. They go home, you know, if they do have lights, they're red. So it was surprising to me that the neighbors did that, but I understand, you know, not in my backyard kind of attitude sort of can control things.
I mean, to me, that sounds like a much better neighbor than, say, a data center.
Absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, they did the best they could. I don't know if they went around and actually talked to the individual neighbors around their facility. Perhaps that might have been something that they could have done to head off some of the opposition. But it sounds like it was, you know, rural people being very concerned about the city coming to our neighborhood. And I think when you look at it, it wasn't the city coming to your neighborhood. It was probably the least city-like thing you could bring to a rural neighborhood because they want it to stay dark. They want it to stay quiet. And it sounds like one of that fourth commissioner actually thought about it and said, yeah, you're right. You guys are going to be good neighbors and we'll let you go.
Ted, I want to push back a little bit here. I've seen at Cherry Springs, as I mentioned before, and also there's a place down in Virginia where neighbors to these parks where, like, I'm getting blasted with headlights now. I have a whole bunch of noise here. There's always activity. I didn't sign up for this. And what they do is they put up massive lights, right? Because it's pretty easy to fight astronomers. So you just need light, and they'll put up massive lights on their property, and because maybe there is a foundation here, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe there is a basis for them to be a little frustrated with the activity.
It's possible. I can certainly see headlights being a problem. Other than that, it's hard to imagine an impact other than there are people on the piece of land next door, and I don't like to see people because I moved to the countryside.
I think this is interesting. And so since I work on a research observatory that sprawls over many hundreds of thousands of hectares, I just brought a private tour group down last night on a clear night from the upper observatory to the lower observatory. And we all work together, so it's important to be neighborly because they're my colleagues. But in the true sense of being neighborly, I hit the 8-kilometer point where I'm still behind the mountain, and I made a call on the radio. And I said, hello, Very Energetic Radiation Imaging Telescope Array System. I am at 8 kilometers. How would you like me to proceed? And they said, call me when you get to 4 kilometers. And I called them then, and they said, now call me when you get to 1 kilometer. And why I'm saying that is because that reaches out very importantly into the part of this conversation where we are bringing an observatory into a community that has never had one. Whipple Observatory has been where it is now since 1968, right? So most of the neighbors are like, yes, this is our observatory and we love it very much. But when you're bringing something new in, it's about educating and creating that relationship first. And in a rural community, especially I work with rural communities all the time, if we are going to do something that disrupts the rural community, the relationship has to be established before the request. Oftentimes in astronomy, I'm going to be very strongly worded about this, we tend to think, we are bringing you an amazing resource, be very excited, but we don't ask the community how they feel about it or what we can do to help them accept us and welcome us into the community. And so in a lot of ways, these things can be avoided. Now, I don't know the whole situation with the Powell Observatory. I don't know if that happened and that there was still friction there. But usually if we just talk in advance and start creating those relationships, it's much easier to build a foundation for the future. And in this particular situation, man, you can ask the guests to turn off their headlights. My guests last night, I said, please park your cars this way. And whoever manages to turn off their headlights while they turn on their car gets a special prize from me so that you do not blast the telescope with your headlights because we parked looking at it. And one of them anyway. And so it's remembering to balance that with your community and be a part of it and be a resource rather than an obstruction or a perceived obstruction.
What prize can I win?
Well, last night, nobody did it, but they tried. They tried really hard, but it was a baseball cap yesterday. So, but there are ways, right? So there are ways to make this happen and to really be a good neighbor about it. And to that effect, I get to say I'm in between two communities, right? And so we have a constant conversation about, I can't have lights outside of my house at night because the observatory is there, as opposed to the other county and the other community that if something is going to cause light pollution in that community and I go to a town hall, I frequently don't get a chance to speak because the entire county stands up to say, do not hurt our observatory. And so you're always looking for what is it I need to do to help these people believe in me in the northern end of this county, like the people in the south end. And so find what it is that they need, what access, what reassurances, and what behavior do I have to change?
There we go. This word of wisdom right there. Have you guys, I'm going to shift a little bit. Have you guys been down to the border wall?
All the time.
So they're starting this show. We'll know that we've covered the story in Big Ben has been constantly blowing up, moving really fast. I don't have anything new at the moment on the show, but I do have this piece that construction equipment's moving into the area for the Big Bend Ranch State Park. That is an area that is supposed to have a wall through it. They're already getting all the steel and everything set up. And, we have the Trump administration awarded the largest wall contract in the Big Bend region for $1.7 billion. That was to Southwest Valley Constructors, Albuquerque company. And they also waived 28 federal laws, which included everything from environmental, cultural, you name it. They waived all protections that would be having to be reviewed prior to wall construction to just kind of build the wall as they see fit. One interesting piece was there was an interactive map that showed maybe a 3-mile impact from border wall lighting on, say, like light pollution in Big Bend. Ken Walchuk was on last month. He didn't believe that would be a case. I've never seen these walls. It kills me. It really gives me pain to think that someone wants to destroy this beautiful, rugged, amazing national park. But what's the impact going to be? You guys have seen these border walls. What are we looking at?
Well, I stare at them every day. The area where we would see them mostly is in between Nogales, Arizona, and Nogales, Sonora, Mexico. So the light pollution from the cities themselves, it blends in. But if you were, you head east of there toward Bisbee, Arizona, I can see that. I can see those lights and I know exactly what they are. Now, the border wall is a lot different right now, right there, because it's not what you're thinking of when you say a border wall. So it's patchy and it's very different. It can be cattle guards right now, or it can be other things. So the impact is fleeting at this time, but I can imagine if that one section of it that I can see became 100 miles long, that would definitely pose a visibility issue. The lights are very bright. And again, if they were shielded and pointing down at the ground, up to 90% of that light isn't shooting up into the atmosphere and reflecting back to Earth.
Amy, are they vertical?
They're unshielded.
Just unshielded, but I guess they have maybe a 45-degree angle, or?
It's different on every part of the border wall that I have seen that is lit. It's different lighting. It's never been the same, because different parts of it have been constructed at different times by different contractors with different parameters.
Of course. Why not?
Right. So, well, and that's because this has been an ongoing conversation in the United States for many, many years. This isn't the border wall in Nogales has been there longer than I've been in Arizona, for absolute certain. I've been here almost 10 years. It far predates me. So it's not going to be the same project as one today. I think in terms of light pollution, yes, I'm deeply concerned about the impacts of the light pollution. I'm equally, if not more concerned, and I think Michael is a better expert to talk about this, the impact on animals. Because we do have Whipple Observatory is in the pathway of the Mexican jaguar, and its hunting grounds and its mating grounds, and they come from Mexico. So, and that's true. There's different species all along the border that cross back and forth. This is a true animal byway. It's a binational animal byway. And so what happens to them? And then what happens to the plant species that are unique to Big Bend that require darkness? Because most plant species that flower, for example, require darkness to heal and to grow just like human beings. So, but I'd like to pass it to Michael because I am not the expert on that type of conservation.
No, you laid it out perfectly about, the fragmentation, because these animals don't know that they're crossing into a state or a county or county lines. And then also that it's easy if you're politically active, this administration, but this is a multiple administration issue. And then just like you laid out, having a different wall, a different lighting here, and then a different contractor here. So it's a generational problem. But yeah, no, I'm really concerned about the habitat fragmentation. In the area that I'm in here, it's mainly forest fragmentation because we have monocrop plantations or an old growth actual forest with different trees. But in the desert, it's similar, but at the same time different with the ecosystem and what they all are dealing with down there. I know several organizations that they're doing every tool in the toolbox they can use, whether it's a lawsuit or protest or writing letters to their local representatives. So that's always my advice for folks. If you have an issue like that in your area, it's to use every tool that you have to be able to slow it down if you can't stop it. So that's what I'm aware is happening, at least in this area. Is just they're doing everything they can. What I'm really hoping is that the multiple administrations that have created these problems, I hope it's leading somewhere to where we're finally going to do a course correction, because the vibe that I'm getting is like, whatever political side of the aisle you're on, that this can't just continue. We can't have this society where we're just going to bulldoze our way through because of this person's in office. So no, later on in the show, I mean, in some of the stories we just covered, I'm always thinking of the politics side of it. And I'll probably touch on that a little bit later.
Mike, I want to ask you on that, because I feel like this is in some way, we look at a lot of the pushback from data centers right now. We see what states are doing with data centers, and states, last year we went up through one of my favorite parts in the East Coast, which is out by Davis, West Virginia. That part of West Virginia is just an amazing area. And of course, it's had its experience in the past, but it's still an amazing area. And they want to put a data center like right outside of Blackwater Falls or State Park, and a big data center right there. And the community was fighting it, but the community is being, essentially the state is trying to control that, not the community. And you see this across many jurisdictions, not just in that one spot. We have legislation up in Ontario that does similar stuff on green building codes, where now Toronto is going to control that instead of, the local communities. So this kind of push where it feels like stuff is becoming more centralized and less decentralized, and the community is having less input, that fits right in here, doesn't it?
Well, money talks. We've locally already, the next town over is they're proposing a data center. And, one of my heroes is Erin Brockovich. So I'm really glad to see the work that she's doing and what she's saying, because she has this great map of America where people are reporting, my water's, something's wrong with it, or if a data center's already been built, here's, these are the health effects I'm feeling. So you can see visually, which I think really helps a lot of folks to just see where this is happening. But my advice for listeners is get ahead of it. Don't wait for it to come to your area. Like get something, get a resolution. An ordinance is harder to get in a town for a data center, but get something in writing, because a lot of these cities that already have non-disclosure agreements. So they cannot talk about it legally to the community that this is being built in. I mean, it's wild.
Well, Mike, down in Big Bend, they're doing the same. The individuals down there, they form like a neighborhood coalition, essentially, a bigger version of it. And they're working with their reps and they're working all these places, but it just feels like small government isn't effective. It feels like you're being usurped. And I feel with these border walls is a perfect example. Either you probably have better ways to do this. I'm not saying that you don't need to control the border. We have a lot of bad stuff that comes in. You have drugs, you have human trafficking. These are really important things to, have control on the border for. But to just usurp what the local community is asking for, it feels like something in our current age. I don't understand it.
I've always enjoyed the phrase think global, act local, and similar to light pollution, politically, you can do what you can locally, but you have so much weight coming at you, or light pollution from different cities. And part of the project that I was working on here, those were some of the kind of the naysayer complaints. Well, we're such a small community. We got the big city, they're the problem. My view, how I filter things, that's just not how I view things. You have the power in your zip code. So that's where you can do something. But it does become daunting when there's so much in the system that's creating it, where it's on purpose hard for you to accomplish anything. You could if we had a just system, but we in this country and abroad do not. If you're a person that's not a billionaire, you you don't currently have the power. And so I'm always an advocate for people power, but it is daunting.
I tried last night. I played a 50-50 and I was going to try and get $25,000. It didn't happen. I'm working my way through it though.
If I can add to that, so it is daunting. And I think that's one of the things that makes people like everyone in this call right now very important. My job is to educate. And through education, we empower communities. So when we continue to be the people who are providing accurate information at a level everyone in the community can understand, and we are open and ready to answer questions about all of the ways they are being impacted across all of these different spectra, then we're empowering them to speak on their own behalf. And that is the most important and powerful thing that community members can have, is that ability. It's one thing to be able to speak out, but it's another thing to be able to speak out educated and to know everything that you're talking about. And when members of the community need to sit down with a member of Congress or with their governor or with their state attorney general or with their local council, if they know what they are talking about and they come prepared with that data and they come prepared with true knowledge and facts, that helps. But what makes it stronger is that human story too. So they have to have both of those things. And we are the people who can provide the one half. I can provide them with the facts and the education so that they can bring their human element to it in a way that also reaches the logical side of government.
Amy, I'm having such a good time talking with you guys that I totally blew over the time. And I want to give you guys a second here. I'll have one more article in this episode, but I want to give you guys a second to plug yourselves. So, Amy, since I already called your name out, where would you like folks to learn about more of what you're doing? Because you have a lot of hands in many different pots, and I'm impressed. I mean, the amount of coffee you must have to drink as.
Oh, I love coffee. Coffee is my true love. Don't tell my partner that. He knows. But, well, first and foremost, people can always visit me at Whipple Observatory, right? So if you're visiting Arizona, there's a shameless plug. Come visit Whipple Observatory, but not during monsoon season because we are closed because rain.
You parked the right way, you win a hat.
At night. Yeah, if you work the right way at night. But we're also not usually open at night. So we are a functional research observatory with over 30 telescopes. So we have to protect the work. It's a very controlled kind of visitation at night. But I say visit me at Whipple Observatory. And that's the primary way. People can also follow me online. My @handle is always Nerdy Astronomer. So if you're looking for me on TikTok, Facebook, or Instagram, it is the same everywhere. So you can find me quite easily. And I talk about a lot of those things. I do a lot of things like Ted does. I am a NASA Solar System Ambassador. So go to those events and meet those individuals. Hopefully Ted and I will both be at the JPL open house this year if we're all invited to go work that. And you can visit us there in Pasadena, California, or visit me at the Sequoia and Kings Canyon Dark Sky Festival this year as well, or in Spain for the eclipse.
Missed that. We went up to Ray Lakes right when that started. I don't know if you've ever been up to Ray Lakes in Kings Canyon.
I have not. I stayed in the trees.
Well, the trees are very nice. I'm not going to knock the trees. They're impressive. Ray Lakes it's a alpine lake system, and it's impeccable. It's amazing. It's a moment. A lot of people go up there, but it still doesn't degrade the experience. It's a beautiful place.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'll say what got me stuck in the trees is I got distracted because someone told me there was a glowworm in the forest. And so I had big dreams that I was going to go somewhere else. And then someone said, but have you heard of the California pink glowworm? And I was like, no.
Did you see it?
I did not, but I looked really hard. The thing about tracking glowworms is that is really tough work. So when you've got one can trap and, 800,000 hectares, the likelihood you're going to catch something is almost nil. So, but yeah, so those are a lot of places you can see me. Or if you go to Spain, Coruña, Spain for the eclipse in August, I will be out that way for that as well. So
excellent.
I'm highly recognizable. The guests of the podcast can't see me, but I look just like my avatar on social media. Usually glasses, red hair. So really easy to spot in a crowd. So come out and look for me.
Sounds good. I have to take a look and have Ted. What's going on? Where can people learn more about your work and any talks or any outreach you're doing?
Well, at the moment, the website for the International Dark Sky Discovery Center is darkskycenter.org. And I'll talk a bit more about that later, but it is going to be an educational facility to educate and hopefully inspire people to protect dark skies wherever they live. We are going to be an international resource, not just for folks in Fountain Hills or in Arizona, but for all over the world. We'll have some amazing exhibits there. We've got a planetarium. We've got a 27-inch plane wave telescope that's operational now. So darkskycenter.org is the website there. And I'm also active in the occultation field. So we study asteroids by observing them pass in front of a star, and the star winks out for some amount of time, depending on the size of the asteroid and how fast it's going. And so that's a way of studying asteroids without spending $1 billion to go send a mission up to look one close up. And it's amazingly accurate. So you can go to occultations.org. We don't study the occult. It's not witchcraft. Occultations.org is the website for that. And we encourage we encourage amateur astronomers to become citizen scientists. With the equipment you already have, you can contribute to information about these asteroids. That data goes right to the Minor Planet Center, becomes part of the official set of records for that body. And when asteroid scientists at Lowell or at Center for Astrophysics or somewhere else are interested in it, they can learn a lot about it before even considering putting in a proposal for grant money, because we work for free. And that's our contribution to solar system science as best we can.
Excellent. All right, Mike, how can people learn about what you're into these days?
Well, I'm laughing. I was just thinking about, Ted, what you mentioned about the occult. One of our, I think it was the first.
You're into the occult. It's okay.
One of our first dark sky communities, it was Antelope, Oregon, and we did have a cult there. So that at first made it challenging to get other communities certified, because that's what they thought. What, that town? So, but totally separately, I'm really active on LinkedIn. I really enjoy networking with folks, and that's how I am able to find out about different cool projects that I can maybe apply locally. And at the same time, I hope that the stuff I'm working on maybe can help inspire folks that they can work in their own community with different things I'm doing. But anyway, you could Michael Calhoun for Nonia, Oregon. And then I have a Facebook page, Michael Calhoun for Columbia Soil and Water Conservation District. And there I post all environmental articles.
I want to finish up today's show with this little article here. Would you guys stay at an Airbnb that had its own observatory? Amy, for you, that's not a vacation. I get it.
I was asked to provide outreach at a group that was visiting an Airbnb that had its own observatory on the roof. It was a telescope on the roof. And when you are asked to come and deliver a product like that, trusting somebody else's telescope equipment is the worst thing you can do, because you'll never be confident that it's going to work. I looked at the website for that particular Airbnb you mentioned, and it seems pretty sophisticated, and it was visual observing. There was an eyepiece, but in many of these cases, it's looking at it on an iPad or some kind of a screen. But I wouldn't necessarily believe that an Airbnb that said we have a telescope would do you any good, because telescopes are notoriously fickle, easy to misoperate, and have problems with them. Unless it's your own equipment, you know how to fix what's wrong. It would be a little scary to me to spend money to go to an observatory, to go to an Airbnb because it had a telescope.
Well, this one has a patent pending observatory experience. The Airbnb itself is located near Joshua Tree National Park, includes a hot tub, game room, fire pit. It's got a domed observatory. Yeah, I see what you're saying about the iPad. I think for many people, that's probably like the first entry into, say, astronomy these days, right? I think of my C-Star or any kind of digital telescope. And, just like everything else in life, you look at it on your stupid little screen that you have. And then you look there on your couch, have your windows, shades closed, right? Outside it all, looking at it, going through.
I gave a TEDx talk a couple of years ago about the view through the eyepiece. And I think people deserve the opportunity to see it live with just glass between you and the universe. We do have a C-Star. When I go out, my wife comes out with the C-Star, and I will show people an object, and then we'll show them how it looks in the C-Star after that, to get an idea of what a camera can do that your eye can't do. But the connection to the universe, I think, comes from those photons directly into your eye. That's irreplaceable.
All right. Well, this scope they have there is somewhere in the 120, 180 millimeter range. So it's refractor. It's a pretty big guy for an investment into an Airbnb. And if you're wondering, what it costs to stay here, it's just $767 a night. That's all. So book your vacations now. Well, I think that does it for this episode. I want to thank my amazing slate of guests, Ted Blank, Amy Oliver, Michael Calhoun. I also want to thank you, the listener, for staying with us today. As a reminder, this show is here because you, the listener, and your generous support have made it possible. You can support us in any way you feel best, preferably a monthly subscription. But if you can't afford that, why not just share the show with friends, share on social media, or help us otherwise spread the word. This show is recorded on June 21st, 2026, and was edited and cleaned up by Kaden Ballman. Laura Taylor and Emily Byers are our volunteers of social media. And of course, I'm Bill McGinney, reminding you to only shine the light where it's needed.